Hello there. Welcome back to the podcast of Wednesday's Child. You're joined by Sarah Ledger and Debbie Watson, your podcast hosts for the day. We talk on this podcast about all things to do with eating disorders. We're picking a fairly loosely themed topic today around behaviours and how you manage your various behaviours associated with being entwined in an eating disorder or recovering from one. So before we get into the weeds of that, let me welcome my co-host, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. How are you doing today?
I'm cold, Debbie.
I know it is proper chilly, isn't it? But
It is.
we're late September, so
I
officially
know.
we're autumn, aren't we?
I think though Middlesbrough's had nothing but cold for the last
Oh,
12 months, so then I think it feels like it should be warmer. But hey ho, like it's sunny. It is sunny here, in
still
fairness
blue
to it, but it
sky.
is cold. But it is cold.
Yeah. Oh well.
But apart from that, I'm all good, thank you.
Out with the tights and the long boots. I quite
Yes.
like that. I like that time of year.
Yeah, I do like getting cozy and snuggly.
Yeah. Oh, okay, so I just prefaced this episode briefly by saying that I'd really like us to touch on behaviors today, and I really mean that kind of in the generality, really, just nothing too specific, but there's so often we get emails and have befriending conversations with people that say, oh, how do I manage this particular thing, or how did you deal with that behavior, or the temptation to do that? And I thought if we could use this episode to discuss some of those factors, some of the ones that we think come up more frequently, I thought that might be really helpful. I also understand in saying that some people might find elements of this a little bit more triggering if those are behaviors that they know they have particularly struggled with. And if you're a parent or carer listening to this, perhaps you might find it, I suppose, potentially quite awakening to recognize some of the behaviors that your loved ones may have been going through. And maybe for you, you may be thinking, oh, okay, I can now identify with that in the person that I love. So when we talk about behaviors, Sarah, and the management thereof, are there ones that for you immediately spring to mind? Perhaps ones that you had to work really hard on as you were getting into recovery, ones that maybe you thought, I'm never gonna hit this on the head. What are there any that, the word behaviors, it surfaces up something for you?
There's actually one event whenever
Oh,
I think about this phrase, and I actually thought about it this morning when I was making my breakfast. And it was an event in day services. And it was in that period of time in recovery that we all go through where you have to sort of set yourself challenge foods.
okay.
And then you work on that challenge food for a week and you layer up. We'll talk about layering up of behaviours and what have you, I think, at some point. But this is a particular thing about a bagel. And I remember I was handed a pack of bagels and I was in day services with my nurse. And I just kept putting them in and then I just kept freaking out. So then they were burning. So then they were inedible, and I kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And it got to the last bagel, and I just remember turning to my nurse and I was like, "Fuck's sake, it's a freaking bagel!" And she was like, "It is. Just put it in the toaster." But it was so that's maybe the first one that springs to mind is that kind of that absolute figure of that tiny piece of food, whatever it is. In that instance, it was a bagel, but that we've all got so many of them. So a fear of an actual piece of food, I think, would be the first one that sprung to my mind just then.
And do you remember how you kind of set the strategy for overcoming that in particular?
I think for me, the strategy has to go right back to the beginning. So it's approaching all of these behaviors and all of these shifts without judgment. I think that's the first part that we need to crack in recovery is that the behavior isn't you. The behavior is just a behavior. It's just a something at the time that's attached to you or alongside you. And the minute that you kind of start to think about the fact that that behavior isn't you, therefore that behavior can change,
Right.
is a huge step was a huge step for me because up until that point it was all about me. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm useless. I'm worthless. What's the point? Well, it wasn't. It was the behavior wasn't good enough. The behavior was useless to me. The behavior was worthless to me. So getting that separation allowed me to stop judging myself as bad and started judging the behavior as inappropriate to help me thrive.
So when I think about behaviors, sometimes I can relate to that in as much as that I had to take myself out of the behaviors and see them with an external set of eyes. You know, what does this behavior look like to someone else, to a fly on the wall? You know, what does it look like when captured on a secret camera somewhere? That
Yeah.
for me, I had to deal with those behaviors that way rather than making them tolerable and acceptable in my universe, whatever, regardless of whatever pain they were causing me. And actually, I think for me, I had to carry on with having that attitude to behaviors for quite some time. So every time I was tempted to be drawn back into things. And so if I think about something that kept coming up for me until I had really kind of dealt with that behavior was the temptation to revert to using childlike cutlery, you know, small teaspoons, teaspoons for everything, small dishes for everything. I, I I found myself doing it. Sometimes I could go weeks at a time where I didn't, and then all of a sudden, when I wasn't even consciously thinking that, oh yeah, this is a bad day, so I'm going back to the teaspoon. But all of a sudden, I would find myself doing it, and then I had to kind of think, oh, you know, if that camera's capturing me, if that person could see me now, that's not okay. It's a behavior. It's not normal. It's not right.
And it's not that you weren't normal and you weren't right. It was the
No.
fact that that behavior wasn't normal and wasn't right. But I know a lot of people who are listening to this will be thinking, right, great, that's a big leap thing, isn't it? When you can start to figure out that detachment. But in the moment, at that point, with that bagel incident, or with when you're about to grab your little bowl, for me, it was also learning about the things to do at that absolute point of crisis and point of need. So we've spoke about this a million times. I was a big one in my recovery about getting angry. So I would go like take a massive breath out was like a realization of me of right, something's going on here. So that breath out just gave me a moment to pause. I then would use my phrase. So I'd often say, I'm spinning, which was me saying out loud to anyone or just the universe, there's something not right here. I would turn on my heels, I would take myself away for 30 seconds, but then I would have to make myself come back. And going through those three phases meant that I was accountable to change that behavior. But I was giving myself a structure and a bit of a space to let my brain and the real me, my healthy brain, kick in to go back, to put it back in the toaster and to do the eating
So
thing.
it's a change of gear, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
so you do the exhale, which just stops the moment. You articulate something, so kind of a halting word or halting phrase, which in your case
Mm-hmm.
was I'm spinning. And then it's that physicality of changing the environment. So
Yeah.
got to step out of this room or walk to the other side of the house or go out the back door and then come back in again.
Yeah.
But always reverting back and reminding yourself that it's never fixed by walking away. Because my
Yeah.
behaviors, when I freaked out by my behaviors, the childhood Paddy would set in often of can't deal with behavior, can't deal with behavior. I know I'll escape. And
Mm-hmm.
escape is not the option because
No.
escape just means you've given into the behavior, become overwhelmed by it, and you haven't faced that scenario and lived through it.
That's why the third and fourth part of that structure was a very strict 30 seconds.
Mm.
And you have to learn to be strict with yourself. So the first times you do that, you go through that process and the 30 seconds is up. The first time you go that and you're walking backwards, you're going to be crying your eyes out. You're going
Yeah.
to be absolutely past yourself. Your hands are going to be sweaty. You're probably like, you've played with your hair so much that that's got greasy and it's it's going to manifest itself in all sorts of ways, but the only way out is through.
Yeah.
That's the thing that we say all the time, and that you have to keep in your head. The only way out is through. So you have to go through that pain and that hurdle in order to ultimately get out the other side. So that was a strategy that I learned quite early on, and I got support in doing it to start off with. So like I would say to anyone around me, when I struggle, you're going to hear me say these things. You're going to watch me do this stuff. Just watch me. Don't judge me. Don't try and help me. Actually, just be there, be in the space, and let me do my thing, and then ultimately we'll get it sorted.
interesting about you saying not requiring somebody to help you. Were there any behaviors where you did require intervention by somebody else?
I suppose all of my recovery, though, early days, wasn't it? Because I was one of the fortunate ones, was all intervention. So I can say that kind of, I asked people not to help me from a very safe place of the fact that people always had their eyes on me.
Yeah.
So I knew you have to learn to be accountable to yourself. I remember Dr. Katie taking me through that process quite later on in my recovery, actually, like this has to be about you and has to be about you as an individual. So you are accountable to you. But the fact that I kind of was, I suppose, under supervision as I was to start off with. My year of my real recovery, though, that is when I just kind of did have to go solo because I'd tried it too long with people kind of having their eyes on me, and it got me to a certain point. But I knew to get over that final hump, it had to be me on me, doing it for me.
Well, that's really interesting because I suppose I see the behavior recovery differently because predominantly that was done under kind of the parental roof or whatever. It was while people were around me. So yes, I had to have those conversations with them about particular behaviors I was concerned about and that I was trying to conquer. But in my case, some of the time it was, and when this happens, please help me by doing this. And that
Yeah,
might be, please help me by coming and joining me for having something to eat while I do this, or please make sure that I don't pour this food into this type of receptacle. You know, and some of those things, in a way, I was almost drawing people into creating a sense of conflict because in a way you're asking someone to say, because you tend to have those conversations when you're a little bit more lucid,
yeah,
but
yeah.
actually when you then press the alarm bell or when they are ready to step in because they've seen the flag and they see the behavior, you're at the point of saying, no, 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 I want to cling on to the eating disorder. No, no, forget everything I said. No, 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 don't stop me using the teaspoon. No, don't make me eat this. No, don't. And then all that conflict is there. It's just, it can be a really vile time for the person that loves you because, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't at that point.
Course, and that's where everybody in recovery therefore needs to get support. So another behaviour to make sure you grab hold of is, and this is a behaviour to keep as opposed to push away, is that reaching out for extra help and extra support whenever you need it, and whoever needs it and how. Even like you're on about there, like people being around, it doesn't need to be like in your face support. I think sometimes, especially I imagine parents, because obviously I was a wife when I was poorly, so I wasn't living with my parents. But I think especially parents, because I would want to do this as a man myself, you think, right, I'll fix this by doing. I'll fix it by, I'll do everything. I'll be around. I'll supervise everything. So we'll fix it together. But actually, just as simple as like knowing the timings of the meals, so you can be all sat on the settee and just a simple, oh, supper time, and make it
Yeah.
quite like casual and quite light. We definitely did that as a family. Just as it just that then there's that just that reminder of, I'm now accountable to me. I'm also accountable to you because you reminded me it's supper. I'm gonna have to go make my porridge. So like
Yeah.
it's just you don't have to be in doing the doing. You can just be around, kind of just doing that, like kind of guide on the side sort of
Yeah.
role.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I mean, moving away from the food, particularly, we've sort of more covered that in terms of behaviors. What about other things? What about compulsive movement and those sort of behaviors?
That's like, I don't know, I think for many that's actually like the hardest because everywhere you go and everything that you do, you're told that that's the way to live your life, isn't it?
Well, I'm going to bring up now, and we haven't discussed this prior to the episode, so I hope it's okay with you, but I'm going to bring up one of the first times that I stumbled upon you in social media space, and you were doing a kind of a behavior response, which it really sat well with me in terms of I like this person. I like how she's dealing with her recovery. And it was a time you were clearly at work and you had taken yourself off in the car because there was some kind of office walk or something,
Yeah.
and they were all going out exercising and had brought all their exercise gear in. And you were saying in this piece that I'd seen you do that, I have made a conscious decision. I can't hang around this. I can't have my trainers here with me at work. I can't even be prepped to do it because I'll be drawn into it. So I have got myself in the car. I am taking myself off to go and buy myself a sandwich. And then when I go back in the office, they'll have done their thing. They can get it out of their system, but I've been no part of it. But for you at that time, that was your best possible approach to removing yourself from the potential behavior, even though in other people's worlds, just to have done, whether it was I don't know, a lunchtime walk or run or whatever, would have felt very normal and a well-being activity. But you knew at the stage you were in your recovery, it was a destructive behavior to partake in it. And it
Yeah.
was a better
Fitness
behavior
Fridays.
that was it, Fitness Friday.
Yeah,
To
Fitness
to go and
Fridays.
eat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like you're dead right. I remember it clearly because I went and sat outside the library in Middlesbrough eating a massive tuna and cheese, like toasty melt thing I'd got from a cafe around the corner. Like I drove to the cafe. Yeah, and that's hard. It's hard because it's hard for a number of reasons. It's hard because of the behavior. You're screaming, you want to go and do that thing, but you have to choose not to. But it's also hard because your eating disorder keeps you isolated for such a long time, and then you have to go through a period where you actually have to withdraw yourself from social activities if it's not matching your recovery. So there is a period where everything just feels like a massive old contradiction. But I think that's a prime example of you looking after your recovery when it comes to movement. There's the other things though, isn't there? So it's the subtle things with movement, I think. So, you can, it takes time, but you can ditch your trainers. You can stop going to the
Yeah.
gym. You can not partake in Fitness Friday, but you also have to do the small things like you have to stop parking the furthest away in the supermarket. You have to make sure that you don't go to the wrong end of the supermarket first, so your journey's a lot longer. You've got to make sure that if you actually are like picking your kids up from school and you're walking home, that you do the most direct route and not the one that takes you, all around the steps, all around the different streets. So it's all those small things, taking the washing down. You have to carry it in a pile rather than doing it like a pair of socks
One
at a
item
time.
at a time.
um, and it's getting to that point, and it does come in recovery. Anyone listening, it definitely comes where you're like you almost go to do something, and then you check into yourself and you go, hang on, that's that thing. That's that thing happening here, right? I'm gonna get back in my car. I'm gonna go and park as close as I can to the door of Tesco.
Yeah.
Um, and again, it's just that you've got to notice it, and then you've got to do the opposite action. You've got to do the thing for recovery as opposed to the thing for the eating
Calling
disorder.
yourself out, isn't it? And saying, can't kid a kidder. Come on, I
Yeah,
know why I'm
yeah,
doing this.
yeah,
This isn't just because I happen to really like this extra walk from here to my office. It's not that at all. It's about saying this is a behavior. This is not convenience. It's not sensible. And it's tipping with rain, and there's absolutely no point on God's earth that I should be doing this. And it's a behavior, and I'm calling it out, and I'm not doing it.
yeah.
I'm doing the opposite. The other one I did want to just mention today was about something that you've touched on there about isolation, and I think one of the behavioral issues that we've become all too used to, and I think we really have to work on, is where we've got used to saying no, or got used to making excuses, or got used to allowing our eating disorder to manipulate our choices in life. That is something that I'm reminded all the time by friends who know me really well, how incredibly painful that was for them. Times when they most wanted to call me out on my bullshit and say, that's rubbish, Debbie. You know, it's not that you're poorly. You know, it's not that you can't make that day. You know, it's not that, oh, it's not convenient or whatever. It's you not doing it because it prevents you going to the gym, or it stops you having that sneaky extra walk, or it means that you would have to sit down and eat, or it's those kind of things. That for me is the level of behavior activity that I am most, and I'm going to say it, ashamed of, because it put enormous strain on people who loved me the most and most wanted to see me well. But there is only so far they can go in that journey. There is only
Yeah.
so much they can do. I suppose I look back and I have said to some now, why didn't you just tell me I was a pain in the bloody arse? Why didn't you just turn up on my front door and put me in the car and take me to that meal out or whatever it was? But you can say that all you like in recovery, but it's really challenging for someone who loves you as a friend or as a family member. There's only so much they can do. And that there is always going to be a point at which they say, we've got to exist. We can't
Yeah.
do this. We know this is bullshit. We know she's making excuses. We know she's doing this because of her illness, but we can't drag ourselves through that. And I can see why it must just be so hard.
So they'll just stop asking. That's the
Yeah,
thing. That's what I find. And
yeah,
I remember I used to say, well, why am I not getting invited anymore? What's wrong with me? And it wasn't until like I started being able to attend things again. And it was like, oh, hang on. You just stopped asking because I kept saying no.
yeah,
They weren't being mean, but they were still there. That's the thing. You're good mates, you're good members of your family. You if you have a period of time where you're either you're away because of your anorexia is keeping you away, or you choosing to be away because you're trying to deal with some behaviors before you go back into that kind of environment, they will still be there and they'll welcome
yeah,
you with open arms. I mean, I used to when because I did that usually exactly the same as you, Debbie. I used to like there was a million reasons why I didn't do something or a million reasons why I wouldn't turn up to stuff when I was poorly. And then when if I did turn up, I used to get so drunk that I was a horrendous person to
oh
be with
wow,
because I would like go, I would be full of anxiety because I was there. So I'd start hitting the beer, but I probably hadn't eaten properly for like could have been days on end beforehand leading up to the event. So I'd have a couple of beers and I'd be absolutely pissed and I'd be the one in the corner like being an absolute idiot. So again, they'd stop. And it wasn't until you start to get better and you kind of go, oh God, I remember that barbecue, that bonfire party. Oh yeah, that's right. I was like in the street, wasn't I? And your friends are like,
oh
yeah, you were. But we're still here. Like, and
yeah.
that's what they will always be there. But that comes to that bit where it's that self-realization that you've got to go through it and you've got to kind of, and also then if you're saying no to lots of things in your recovery again, because people like toolkit stuff, we've had episodes before, haven't we? I think there's an episode called Just Say Yes,
Yeah,
where we both went through a period of time where whatever was presented to us, you just said yes, obviously within reason. I wasn't going to start jumping out of aeroplanes, but but if you want to, if anyone's listening, please feel free to jump out of an aeroplane. You sit down in your mum's house and she comes out the kitchen and goes, oh, do you want a piece of fruitcake with your coffee? Anorexia's going, don't be stupid, but you have to go, yes, that would be lovely. And you just have to say yes to everything. And you get to a point where you're thinking, I'm saying yes to stuff and I'm full and I'm hot. But you then get your brain then gets to a period where it starts to say, well, actually, we can start to choose again now because we're over that hurdle.
it
We
does,
know
it
what choice is.
normalizes, doesn't it? And you
Exactly.
get to a
Yeah.
point where you realize that you can go back to saying, I tell you what, Mum, I really have never liked fruitcake, particularly
Yeah.
your fruitcake, which is really, really burnt fruitcake. But you know what? If you've got like, sponge or if you've got a
Yeah.
biscuit, I'll go for that. That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Exactly.
There is a,
So
there is a PS to this episode, and I think it's a really important one because sometimes we can dredge over the coals of our behaviors and we can end up going, shit, I've wasted so much time. I've put this on family, on friends. I've missed out on this. I gave so much time and energy to behaviors. I think the thing I want to say as my PS to this is give in to the grief and accept that sometimes actually recovering does involve a little bit of the mourning for the the life that perhaps you compromised a bit while you were caught up in those behaviors. Give into it and accept it, but move on from it. Don't get yourself trapped in, especially when you've had a conversation like we've been doing today and you thought about those behaviors or you've just given mental energy to it, and you may do after this episode. And please, share your comments with us, email us. It'd be really interesting to know what you think. But the very last thing you should do is start kind of, you know, laying yourself out there with guilt and sadness at what you've lost out on. The energy should only now go into living the truer, fuller, happier life that
yeah.
you always wanted and hoped you would have had.
Yeah. And life's moments of time, isn't it? So there are moments of time which were a real battle, and there'll be people listening to this who are in one of those moments of time right now. But if you go through that moment of time with real productivity and positivity and determination to get well and to recover, remember the point of being in recovery is to recover. You know, I know we've said it a million times, but it's not about sticking in recovery, it's about recovering. And in being in recovery is just a moment of time, and you get over it. The only way out is through. You get over that hurdle, and then suddenly a whole, if you'd have told me when I was in the middle of my, well, when I was in the middle of my illness, that I'd be hot footing it to Dubai 3 or 4 times a year with work, I'd be like, oh, I was a CEO of a company. I'd been like, stupid, of course not. That's only happened because I got well.
And in such a short period of time, you are a classic example of, change your attitude, change your behaviors, and look at what is created in your life. We're not talking that it's taken you a decade to get from this point to that point. It's happened very, very quickly because you chose to embrace recovery fully. Yes, you had a great toolkit, you had a great support system, but you really tenaciously stuck at it.
And that's because life is better and life can be better. And I know, again, because we've had the comments about me and my illness, because I wasn't ill when I was younger, I did know what life was like before I was poorly, and then
Yeah.
so therefore I knew what life could be like. So if you are listening to this and you've been ill since you were a child, trust us. You don't need to know what it was before. All you need to know is that it will and it can be so much better and so much more fulfilling. So just you don't need your eating disorder to exist. You just need to bat it away.
Well, I think that's a great message for the episode. Thank you, that Sarah. It's very poetic. Well, I hope that conversation around behaviours has helped those of you that are either going through recovery, perhaps those of you that every now and then kind of mournfully look back over those behaviors, or if you're a parent or a carer and you're witnessing some of those behaviors from the sidelines. I think we'll do another episode more on the perspective of dealing with those behaviors when you are the person that loves someone who's going through eating disorder recovery. But as a kind of starting point, I really hope this has been a helpful conversation. As ever, I really welcome your comments and contributions about the topics we discuss. So please do feel free to give us an email at hello@wednesdayschild.co.uk, and we'll come back to you and give you our thoughts or just share those insights for other people as well. Thanks for listening to the Wednesday's Child podcast. We'll be back with another episode very soon.